Okay, yeah, welcome to the 3D design class. Today we'll be doing a bunch of little holiday decoration things, just what I'll be demoing as the actual content. We'll begin with just talking about 3D design in general. I'll show us the website that we have at the public library of how you can find the 3D machine that we have and submit files. And then most of the class will be actually designing and just seeing all the buttons and stuff like that. As we go, if anyone has any questions or if you want to, yeah, basically if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. You can unmute as long as it doesn't take up, too much time or it's not too distracting. We can do those as we go. Okay. Okay, yep. So 3D printing is basically this is the machine we have, the exact machine that we have at the public library. So what it basically does is it has a spool, you can see it on the side, of plastic PLA filament. And this hot end, this nozzle thing in the middle, this gondola, that's basically melting out the plastic as it kind of feeds it in. And it's building up an object based on a 3D file that you can find online, or you can make homemade like we'll be doing today in the class. You can do 3D design with lots of things. They build rocket ships by metal 3D printing. They build medical devices, all kinds of things. So today it's just the really basic free website online you can do to make it. But all types of sciences and professional fields use some type of CAD design. From gaming to building and designing houses. Like we said, health and medicine, theological sciences, like publishing and ad design, just building, 3D things to show on TV. All these use some type of CAD, and it's all pretty cool. There's just a few examples of 3D printed things that I found on the web. So, like I said, the one we have is just is using plastic, but it can do a lot of cool objects. So it can just build basic little things. Let me move this. It can just build basic little static, plastic things. But it can also depend upon flexibility and things like that. You have this basket which was printed in one single piece. And then you just kind of break it up a little bit and then it unfolds to this 3D basket. You can use the properties of the plastic to do lots of cool stuff. I've seen people make chip clips and things like that that depend upon the flexibility of the plastic that it uses. You can build joints in things. This little mouse, which is kind of small on the screen, but its tail moves. It's like a whole bunch of segmented joints which make up the tail. You can do joints, you can do threads and screws in 3D printing, all kinds of cool stuff. Oh yeah, this is the chip clip. A couple things to think about ahead of even getting into designing something. Uh, so one kind of the main thing is that, as you can see on slide one, it's building things from the ground up. So when it gets to, X height, it needs to build on top of, one height below it. Oops. So when you build something that looks like this dragon design, what the 3D printing machine is going to do automatically, this is not something you need to think about or put in when actually designing an object. But if something is kind of floating up a couple inches off the base plate, the 3D machine is going to automatically build this scaffolding that prints beneath it. It's going to use all this basically extra plastic just to build these automatic columns. That when it gets to the point of the dragon's head, it can begin to build the snout on top of something instead of just free floating. So then it obviously couldn't do that. So just something to keep in mind, if something is going to be kind of floating up with nothing beneath it, the 3D machine is going to automatically build those columns to do it. And a couple things that means. One, if you do something that's a bit too delicate, like this dragon has kind of a delicate chin maybe, you do have to separate the that scaffolding from the dragon head itself. So if the design is slightly too thin, then sometimes when you try and break away that column that's printed to hold it up, that can sometimes damage it. If it's too thin, it's just going to pull away the dragon snout itself. So that's one thing. You just don't want it to be like too thin. We'll talk about being too thin a couple times in the class. And then the second thing with this like scaffolding that needs to build if something is floating is that it increases the print time, how long something takes. This dragon is pretty thin, it's quite long, but it's pretty thin, but it needs to print all of this plastic, hold it up while printing. So that's going to increase how long it takes to print out. So that's the main thing to kind of keep in mind when designing. On the left, we have this little Pikachu where it almost came out all the way, but you can see all this mess and gunk that's coming off of it. That could just be, a flawed print. And if we did the same thing in the same machine a second time, it would come out totally fine, just Pikachu. But sometimes if a design is like too thin, too intricate, something like that, the 3D machine can sometimes make a bit of a mess like that. So yeah, we'll just want to keep those two things in mind. Nothing, too high in the sky with nothing beneath it. Else we'll need to plan on additional like print time. And we just don't want things to be like too thin and too delicate because we don't have we have a pretty good machine. But if it's too thin, sometimes it doesn't come out right or comes out stringy like this. So we just want to kind of keep that in mind. Yeah, do you have someone have a question? Did someone have a question, or did someone just not mute themselves by accident? Yeah, looks like no. Let me know if you do. Okay. Yeah, so right now we'll hop into real quick the library website to see how to submit a file if you end up making something and want to print it out with us, and then we'll get to actually designing. I am on the library website. This is the web address, but you can just get to it on the navigation menu like this. And it'll show us a couple of things. One, to actually submit a 3D file once you design it, or if you just find something online, that's fine too. You'll click on that button in the middle. And then basically you'll just submit this. It's going to come to us at the information desk, and you'll just want to fill in name and contact info. You want to choose the one single plastic filament that is going to be printed in. If you look online, you'll sometimes see 3D objects that have like red and blue and a whole bunch of different plastics in one. That's because some machines can handle that. Some machines have multiple like print nozzles, just like an inkjet machine. But the machine that we have is just a single filament that it uses. If I go back, you can see we just have the yellow on the side. So the whole object has to be a solid yellow or solid any of these colors that we have down this way. We have a heat changing one, we have some metallic ones, and we just have all the rainbow, black and white. So choose that. And then down this way, you'll just add the file that you want us to print. Uh, we will be making what's called a .stl file, which is one of a couple types of 3D files. In the website we'll be using today, it automatically downloads in .stl, so that won't be an issue, but just keep that in mind. And then finally down at the bottom, it's just a little bit of notes. This is the one of the limitations that we have. We have like a print time limit. So it's a 3-hour block that you can use in a given object request. If the object that you have isn't like to scale sensitive, we'll just automatically scale it down if it comes to us and it exceeds this time limit. So we can do that. And then that's also why I mentioned like the column scaffolding that's printed beneath something that's floating. Because even if you have like a quote unquote small object, if it's kind of printed floating up and all the scaffolding takes up a lot of time, then we'll have to scale the whole thing down. So you can just add like size dimension notes in this box if you need it to be an exact size, or you can just say we can scale it down if we need to, as is, anything like that. Pretty simple to submit it to us. Below the submit button, We have all the limitations and what we can do and stuff. I listed a couple of the things. We have a page on finding 3D objects. So tons of communities exist on the web. This is one website that we send people to a lot just because it has so much stuff in it. So this website is a community website. Anything on it, any of these 3D files that you see, you can just click open the page, and then down this way in the files menu, this one has a lot of different things we might not be able to print this off just because it's so big, but then you can just download and you can download the STL file to make a 3D object. You can come to this website, you can type stuff up in the top. We can type in one of the holidays, depending on which holiday you'll be celebrating, and you can find a whole bunch of cool stuff that people have already made. We'll be looking at how to make something like this today, and maybe something like this today, like a ball with all these cutouts in it. But yeah, you can come and take a look at what people have already made on a site like this. That's that. You design it. This again is going to be the page that we'll be at. I've listed a couple besides Tinkercad. Tinkercad it's free and it's pretty basic. It's really easy to use. Hopefully we'll pick it up within a couple minutes. But we'll see that it does have like some limitations since it is the most basic one. So you might take a look at these two if it's a bit too basic to you to really build, lots of cool detailed stuff. We also have those two listed, and then we just have additional rules down this way. Okay, so we'll go ahead and hop to Tinkercad. No questions yet. Yeah, so I'm in Tinkercad. I've logged into my account using my Gmail account to make a free account. When you come in on the home page of the dash, you'll see all my previous designs. You can actually build a couple things in this. You can do like a little code block thing. You can build electronics. But what we'll be doing today is a 3D design. So if you want to follow along now, or when you eventually do, just click create, and then 3D design, and then it's going to open you to a blank page. You won't have these couple things. I've just pre-uploaded them to help with the class. But yeah, you'll have this blank canvas. This is the 3D field. And then you have all the buttons on the top and the like shape menu on the side. We'll go ahead and begin to look at all of this now. Let me just see if I have any slides left I want to talk about. Oh yeah, so this is the full list of buttons. You can just Google this or go to the Tinkercad website to find all the buttons. As I go in today, I'm going to be announcing like which buttons I'm clicking because you have lots of ways to rotate and copy and paste and do all that. So I'll be announcing the buttons that I use, but you do have a lot of little keys that you can use to do stuff. And luckily, a lot of the buttons will be on the page itself. Instead of using the keys, I can just show you the button on the menu. Okay, I'm in my design. Begin, I'm just going to change my name up in the top left. I can just change the name of the file if I want. I'm going to call that holiday. I do Christmas, but obviously you might celebrate something different, so I'll call that holiday ornament. That could be the name of my file, which I'll see back in this menu of all my stuff. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at this page. So it's going to teach us a couple of basic buttons to kind of move around the field, pan the view, and then we'll put some basic shapes on the page and just do a quick demo of the most basic stuff to get the idea of how we actually make stuff. And then we'll just do a whole bunch of different little demos, little projects that maybe you can do a twist on and customize it. And then you can, send it to us to get printed if you want. One thing I didn't mention, which I should have, is the cost of printing something with it. It's usually just $1 to print something that's based on like how big it is. So like up to 28 grams of plastic filament is $1, and then it increments by like 5 cents a gram beyond that. Most of the stuff that fits just within the time limit that we have is going to be about 28 grams. So you can mostly just depend on each print being like a buck or, less than $2 at the max. That's the last thing. Okay. So let's do some basic control. I want just to pan my view around, like just to see things from different angles. I'm going to right click on my mouse and then I can move my mouse to move it around. If I left click, that's my selection tool. And I'm actually just going to put one shape on the field so we can kind of actually be looking at something while we do this. To add a shape to the field, I have my menu of all these shapes, pre-made shapes that I can use. I'm just going to grab this cube and pop it onto the field. And yeah, we can see as I right click my mouse and pan it around, I can see it from any angle. If I spin my mouse wheel, that's my zoom in like that. You can kind of see that as I zoom in too much, I'm kind of like behind my object and I'm kind of out of focus at the moment. So instead of right clicking to move my view around, if I hold down Shift key and then right click, I can pan my view any way that I want, like this, to get this in focus. So I'm going to hold down Shift and then right click to move my field itself. And if I just right click, I'm just going to, kind of spin around in one single place. So that's all going to be with right click and shift right click. We can also, once we begin to have objects on the field, we can select them with the mouse. So I can just click on any given object. And I can also drag the mouse if I have multiple objects on the field, which I can move a second one on now. If I click and drag with the left click, we can see I get this little selection box pop up, and that's going to let me select two objects at once. And then I can click outside of those to kind of deselect them. Let's take a look at the left-hand side real quick. As I pan around with my right click and spinning the mouse, we can see this little view cube is also spinning around. It's kind of showing me the angle that I'm looking at. So this is changing as I change my plane. I can also just click on that to kind of get to any view that I want. I can go to the right side. I can click on the side, the bottom. I can just use this cube. I can also just click and drag it to kind of easily move my whole thing around. Or I can just click on a set, edge or, side of the cube to go to that side directly. So that's an easy way to navigate looking around the field. Hit the right click to move it, side to side, up and down. My home button down this way, that's just going to pan me out and just let me see the whole field at once. The button below it, fit it all in view button, it's going to let me see something that I have selected. So if I left click and click on these two guys, but I'm not kind of looking at them, if I click on the fit all in view button, it's going to focus in on my selected object. So if I want to look at these couple things, I'll click my fit all in view, and then I'm going to zoom in on those. And then any time I'm too zoomed in, I can just click home. It'll zoom me back out and look like that. Plus and minus, obviously, will just zoom us in and out. Same thing as the mouse wheel. We can just do it with the mouse. And then we'll talk about this last button in a bit once we get to it. But basically, it's just going to change kind of like the type of drawing that we see. We can see if I click on it to change to this like flat view. When I look at it from the top down, it kind of fits, flatly. It's just kind of like changing the perspective or type of, 3D drawing, I guess it is. And we'll maybe see today a couple times when it might be handy to switch between the two types of view. Okay, let me zoom out a little bit with my mouse. No questions. So in this program, obviously in 3D design, you have lots of like cool, like sculpted and custom objects. But with this program, the main way that we'll be making objects is just choosing from pre-selected shapes that we have available to us. Let me move this again, kind of in the way. We have a couple menus. It's not just these basic ones. We have all these menus that we can go into. And we can also, now this didn't used to exist, we can also just type in the name of a shape we hope exists, and then find it. And then when we want to add something to the field, to the 3D design field, we just left click and drag, and then we plop it onto the field. And then I can click it with my left mouse, and then I'm just going to use my delete key to get rid of that at the moment. Okay. We know how to move around, we know how to add shapes. And then the basic way that we'll be making new objects in this design program is going to be through like an additive and subtractive process. So basically, we'll be thinking of ways to make new shapes out of combining a bunch of these, and then we'll both be like gluing them into a new shape, and we'll also be using them to like cut away from an existing shape. And I'll show you what I mean now. We have two basic types of adding and deleting stuff. And any object can be one of these two. If I have a solid shape like this, that's going to be stuff I'm adding to my design. And if I have something that looks hollow and translucent like this, that's going to let me cut away from something. And I'll show us what I mean now, just real quick so we get an idea. I'm going to zoom in, shift and right click to pan around. And then I can just left click on a shape and kind of move it. And you can see in this program, we can just kind of like put stuff inside and on top of something else. I have a solid object and I have a hollow object, or a whole object as it's called. And what I can do is I can kind of put this kind of any way that I want. I'll kind of put it like this, just as an example. And then to delete something or to use a subtractive process, I'm going to left click both of the objects that I want to do something with. You can see I have them both selected. I'm moving them both at the same time. And then one of my main buttons is going to be this group button up at the top. I can just use this button. I can also click Control G on the keypad if I want. So I'm going to click on that. And then you can see what happens is it makes it one single new shape. And what it did is it took I'm going to undo. It took the solid shape and left it when it was solid, and it completely erased the hollow, the whole object. And if it was kind of overlapping with any of the solid object, it's going to like delete that stuff. I can kind of use this as like an erasing tool to subtract from my design. I have those two, and then we can obviously do the opposite with two solid objects. I can click on this cube. I can move it around, just kind of like stick it any place that I want, like that. And then I can select them both like this. And then I'm going to use my group tool. And then I just have one solid new object as I made it, completely solid. And then I can keep building up and subtracting to make a whole new shape. That's the basics of this. As we go along, anytime you make a mistake, we have an undo button up at the top. You can also just do the usual Control Z to undo. So if I Control Z, I'm going to undo moves and grouping and adding stuff to the field. I'm going to keep going back in time, basically. And I can also, if I select an object that has been grouped previously, I can use this button to undo grouping, and that's going to split it up into its two previous objects. And I can do the same thing again and again. I can take this object, which was just ungrouped from this, and ungroup it. And then I'm back to all the constituent shapes that made up the whole thing in the end, like that. That's the basic process in this program, at least. It's just adding shapes and deleting shapes to make something completely new. The last thing we'll do ahead of getting into some holiday design is just taking a look at changing the object itself. We can see when we click on something, we have a whole bunch of little handles that we can click on and rotation wheels. So let's take a look at that real quick. Yes, I'm going to click on it. If I look at it from the top down, I can see some easy buttons to just resize it any way that I want. I can do the X and Y at the same time. If I choose one of these middle ones along the length, I just do kind of one stretch at a time. You do up and down, like that. If I pan with my right click, so I can kind of see it at an angle, we can see this little floating white box kind of in the middle, which is kind of like dotted line down to the middle of the object. That's my height adjustment. So I can make it tall, I can make it really small, I can do anything we want with it. This is in the metric system, this like scale in this mode. But one thing that we don't really need to keep in mind while we design is like how big something actually is going to be. We can design something at any kind of like unitless scale. And then when we send it to the 3D machine, we can just automatically scale it up and down to like actual size in inches and stuff like that. We don't need to really kind of come in and say exactly how many inches tall it is now. We just want to make the basic shape and then we can scale it up and down as we need to at any point. We have that. One thing that we'll notice is that as we use this like diagonal one, it's kind of skewing the object. Like I might want to pull it out like this, but if I'm a little bit sloppy, it's kind of skewing it both along the X and Y axis. So what we can do is if we hold down the shift key, while we do this, it's automatically going to keep like the X and Y the same. It's not going to let me like skew one without skewing the second, so it's going to pull it up. Not like this, but like this nice and smoothly, keeping kind of the same basic shape, just scaling it up and down. That's going to be my shift key. We can also, you can see as I'm doing it, it's kind of scaling it up and down from the top left, if I'm pulling on the bottom right. As I design, I might want to kind of stretch something out, but keep it in the same place. Instead of doing it like this, I can also hold down my Alt key along with Shift. I'm going to hold down Shift to keep X and Y the same, and the Alt key, and now you can see it's sizing it from the middle. So it's keeping it in the same place on the design, but scaling it up and down from the middle of that object. So that's my, this is my Shift key. This is my Alt key just by itself, a little bit wonky. But usually anytime I'm designing, I'm almost always holding down Shift and Alt at the same time. I can skew it up and down and keep the same shape and do it from the middle. Okay. That's all the basic buttons. I'll keep announcing which buttons I'm using and all of that as I go. But now we can get rid of this, this one object. I'm just going to click it, and I'm just going to hit my delete key. You also have a delete button up top, so you can just delete it that way. And now we'll just do some like simple basic holiday theme decorations to practice all of this. I'm going to go home, zoom in a little bit, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to use my find tool on my like shapes gallery. And we have a whole bunch of shapes in this, not every single type of thing that we might want, but we do have a lot of stuff in this. If we want to make like a Christmas tree shape, we can just type in tree. It has a whole bunch of different trees that we can use. I'm just going to choose like this basic one. They do have a Christmas one, so I'm just going to choose this one. And then I'm going to find a place on the design pad, and then I can plop it down. And then I also want to add, a little top to the tree. We'll also come in and find a second shape. And I'm going to find something that fits, maybe this guy. And then we'll try to do a basic task, but it'll take a couple steps of sizing this down and then placing it on top of the tree and then gluing it using the group button so it's one solid object. I have my tree that's basically, we can just leave that as it is. And now we'll take a look at this. I'm going to use my shift and right click to kind of zoom in on this. We can see we also have, we saw the size buttons, but all these little spin tools, we can spin the way that it looks on the design. I'm going to spin it all the way down. And we can see that the it's only half of object. It's kind of flat on the opposite side. So let's go ahead and duplicate this object, flip it, and then glue it onto the top. So it's kind of 3D on both sides. We can practice a little bit that way. So I'm going to right click on this. I have a copy and paste button up this way, but it's just the same copy and paste, Control C, Control V as, on a PC anyplace. I'm just going to use those, Control C, Control V. I now have two of them, the same size. I can move them around. And let's go ahead and do all that business to flip it and stack them up. I'm going to grab my rotation wheel on one of these and spin it. You can see when you spin it with the mouse inside of this wheel, it kind of does it like in, like 20-degree chunks. If I move my mouse down outside the wheel, then I can move it smoothly if I just want to do a couple of degrees movement. But in this case, I'm just going down to like an exact 180. It's good just to keep the mouse inside of it, and then it kind of clicks down to exactly 180. Next, we obviously need to raise this up this way so we can stack it and the flat sides can be touching. That last little tool is going to be this little black arrow up this way. I'll zoom in a little bit. This one is not going to change the height of the object itself. It's going to change, how high it is on the field. But it's different from this white button, which is actually changing the height of the object itself. The white one is the height of the object, and then the black one is the height like on the field of my design. Come in, you can see, looks like we have a bit of a job of like manually lining this up and gluing it down. It looks like we have to manually kind of match it up exactly. But we have a couple tools to help us do all this pretty easily without needing to do all that exact fine tuning. The one thing that we'll do is we want to get this exactly on this flat plane of this. Right now, we have what's called the D key. If I tap D on my keypad while selecting an object, it's going to slam it down to the flat plane, so it's flat totally on the ground. That's useful, but it's not useful if I'm trying to go flat on top of an object instead of flat on top of the field itself. But we can use a special tool to do this instead. If I come up this way, we have a couple additional tools above the Shapes menu. This one, the Plane tool, I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then you can see I have this little thing attached to my mouse. And I'm going to put it on the flat top of this object and then click. And then you can see the kind of grid line of my design plane moved up a little bit. I have this new like orange yellow one, and it's now kind of floating off of the default blue one, which is the true bottom of the design plane. I've made like a new plane, and now when I do my D key, D as in drop down, it's going to fit exactly on top of that new plane, which is the same exact height as the top of this object one. So now I have them exactly touching. So that's my plane tool. When I'm done with my plane tool and want to go back to my original view, I'm just going to click on the plane tool again. And then instead of clicking on a different shape or a different side of a shape, like that, I'm just going to click someplace that nothing exists, and then it'll go back to the usual view, and I'll have the usual blue field, which is the default one. I have them flat and touching now. We can go ahead and try and mouse on top and line it up exactly, but we have some additional tools to help us do this job. I'm going to select both of these objects. You can see I have them multi-selected. And then the tool that I'm going to use this time is my Align tool up at the top. Looks like this. I'm going to click Align while I have them both selected. And then you can see I get all these little buttons pop up. And that's going to let me align the two objects relative to themselves. This button is going to put them both on the same axis this way. And then I'm also going to use this one this way. And now I have the middles lined up, as best I can. And that helps us out a bit, maybe not all the way. But then we can come down and try and click on the top object. Obviously, we need to spin it a little bit. We might need to do a bit of a manual job of this still. We can just keep using these tools just because of the angles and how many sides this has. We can't use it totally finish the job. So I can almost line them up exactly using this. And then, yeah, I can see we pretty much line them up exactly both ways, a little bit off, but you could fine tune it a little bit if you wanted to. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in and select them both like this. And then I can use my group tool to just make one solid object now that it's designed the way that it should be. And now when I click on it, I just move it as one. There's a little bit left to do with this. Let's go ahead and put it into view. I'm just going to spin it, not that way. Oops. I'm just going to spin it so it's kind of flat along the line. And then I'm going to come in and you see we have a couple rotation wheels, X, Y, and Z. I'm going to come in and find this one, and now it's going to spin it in the different directions. Now it's standing up like this. If I click on it, you can now see it's like sticking below the like plane of my design. If I click D, it's going to put the bottommost edges of the object on the plane. And now we can just come in and use a couple tools that we've used again. On this, I can select both my tree and my tree top and use my align tool just to quickly put them exactly in the middle like this. And then I'm just going to cautiously just click on my treetop icon, and then I can move that up using the black button up this way. So I'm going to use the black key. You can see I can just put it on top like that. But we still need to do a little bit. Let's go ahead and scale this down because it's obviously way too huge. I'm going to use Shift and Alt to scale it a bit down. Maybe that's not too bad. I can zoom in with my mouse wheel, Shift and right click to kind of pull it back into view any way that I need to. It just takes a little bit of getting used to kind of panning around and getting used to it. We can use the Fit to View button anytime that we want. And then this is pretty much good. I'm just going to pull it up a little bit. But this is going to be printed in plastic. And like I said, if something is slightly too delicate, then sometimes it might snap off if it's only connected by, this tiny bit of plastic. I might just move it down just a scotch. So it's sitting like that and it's well connected like that when I actually get it off. Then I can come in. This is still two objects. I can just come in, select them both like this, and then group them like this. Let that load. Yeah, now we can see we have one single object, and that's pretty much done. We'll do a whole bunch of different ones, but I'm just going to show us now that we have one object in Tinkercad, how we can download it to submit it to us to get printed out if you want. Right now, I have one object on my field, but I also have a couple up this way. When I go to my download button up in the top right, download in 3D print, it's going to give me some options. And by default, it says everything in this design. We don't want that because right now we have a bunch of stuff on the plane. I'm actually going to click out of that and then select this one object and then go back to my download button. And now I'm just downloading that one tree instead of all the stuff off on the side that we haven't talked about yet. Then I'm going to choose .stl, and that did it kind of quickly. And let me just see anything else is on this. Yep, so we basically want stl.obj, and this has also a 3D file, but the machine that we use in the library is going to want .stl. You can download that way. And then, yeah, you'll just come back, submit 3D file, if you want, and then just add that file that we just got down below, and then you'll be good on that request. I'm going to move this off to the side. We'll do a couple additional ones because we still haven't seen every single tool, and it's good to practice the ones we've seen anyway. I'm going to shrink that down. Next, we'll do something. We saw this thing on someone's object they've already made. We'll go ahead and see if we can make kind of something like this completely homemade. I'm going to come back in to up this page. Okay. I'm going to make in the ring that's going to include all the text and the design that we have. So we have a whole bunch of objects. You'll eventually get used to kind of what's on the field. We might use the tube object, but I'm actually going to use this can object instead. I'm going to pop that on. It's just a solid object at the minute. Doesn't exactly look like a ring that we want to be hanging on a tree, something like that. So we'll come in with this object. We can see when we click on it, we have a couple additional like tools that we can use with it. That just changes like the size, kind of smooths out the side as opposed to looking kind of clunky like this. So you might bump that up. Bevel's going to be those like top edges. I'll kind of leave that down. And then segment to something else as well. Since I'm making something like this, I want it to be pretty flat. I'm going to come in, click on it, and pull this way down. It can be pretty flat, so I'll put it at 2. I can just click on this itself and type in what I want. And then we want to hollow this out, obviously, so we can put stuff in it. I'm going to Shift and Alt to expand that up. What we can do is I can just duplicate the object if I want, and I have an exact duplicate. I can change it from being a solid object, stuff that's being added to the design by clicking the whole button, and that's going to be something that subtracts out of the design when I group them in a second. Now I can come in, I could put them exactly like this, but it's obviously going to delete everything if I line them up exactly. So what I can do now is minimize this a little bit. I'll just shrink it a little bit. So it's going to leave a ring on the outside. But we can see when we do that, not only am I shrinking down the length and the width of it, but I'm also changing the height. You can see if I zoom in, I'm now like half the height of the original object since I shrank X, Y, and Z at the same time. So I can just come in, I've done my shrinking down, and I can just click on my little white box to pull it up as much as I want, basically. It's not going to affect anything. I can just do it like that. And then I'll just come back, and instead of manually finding the middle like this, I'm just going to use my Align tool again. I'm going to select both like this, my Align tool up on the top, click on that. It's going to give me all these dots. I can line them up, in some top left edge if I want. I can put them in the middle, but on the left side, or I can do them both middle X and Y. So it's exactly in the middle like that. That's a bit chunky of a ring. I'm going to come back in and look at it this way. We can see now the use of changing the type of view. If I'm looking like top down to see something like this, I'm going to kind of want to look in the flat view, so I can just be looking at it like this. If I'm in this perspective view, it's kind of like confusing at the eye looking at it from the top down. This is a good way, a good time to use that button. Come in, I'm going to use Alt key and Shift to kind of scale it up exactly as I want. And I can kind of choose any thickness that I want. Again, I don't want it to be too thin like this. If we put this on the 3D machine, it probably wouldn't come out too well. It might snap since it's so thin. I don't want to leave it like a little bit chunky, just enough so it'll be stable once it comes out. I have my object. It's sticking all the way down to the bottom, as you can see. So when I click on these both and combine them, I end up with just a hollow ring like this. And then I'm good to go with the base of a design like this. If we want to add some text, I'll show us the built-in way in this website, and then I'll also show us the fancy way to kind of add any type of object or any type of text to this. In Tinkercad, I can look up type of shape. If I type in text, we have a couple text tools. We just have like the alphabet itself, but that's a long time to spell something out and group them all, so I'm not going to use that. If I click on text, I can pop this text object onto the field, move it down a little bit so we can see it, and then you can customize this bit of text, happy holidays, to be anything that you want. But the problem with this is that you only have a couple kinds of fonts. It's quite long. We could scale this up and down and rotate it just like any object, but it doesn't really fit, this type of round object. So we won't use that one. One that you might use is going to be this multi-text object instead. I'm going to type in happy holidays like this. Oops. And then it should be able to text with new line. I don't know why it's not new lining actually. But you could just do two objects. One says happy, one says holidays, and then you can stack them, like this. And then you can scale it down, place it in the object. Still only a couple types of font and things like that, and it doesn't look too pretty. What we can do instead is go to the web, or we can go to someplace else free like Canva. Canva is a 2D graphic design tool. And what we can do in Tinkercad is we can download not only 3D files to like customize a 3D file, but we'll notice that one of the types of files you can add to this design to put in the design is an SVG file. And an SVG file is actually a 2D image file, basically. It's just an image file that's a little bit special. In Canva, I can come in to like the Elements tab, and I can type in uh, Happy Holidays or, Hanukkah, Christmas, anything like that. We have a whole bunch of elements, fancy looking things like this that we can choose and add to this 2D design. But then once I've chosen one like this, I can come up to my download button and I can choose SVG to download it as a special type of image file. And then I can upload exactly this fancy custom thing to my Tinkercad design. I've already put it in. You can see I've uploaded this design. Let me scale it up a little bit. And now I have a really cool looking thing. It's not this, basic clunky text with, simple font in my design. In Canva, I did a couple things to tweak this, and we have to keep a couple things in mind when we add 2D stuff. One, I try to keep everything touching, because if we had, a type of font that had like this eye actually might not be touching. Actually, yeah, the eye is not touching actually. So when I put this in the middle of my design and I eventually print this out, the eye is going to be floating by itself and obviously fall off. The one thing that we can do is I came in and I clicked on my edit image button in Canva to edit the image. I added a custom shadow and the shadow is already applied. This is what it looked like to begin with. You can see the eye is floating off by itself and everything is like kind of thin. It might be too delicate to print out. So if I add a custom shadow and I use this outline tool and make it black so it matches the text itself, I can kind of thicken the whole design so it's nice and chunky. It's going to be printed out in one piece and nothing is going to like snap off. I should scale it up like this and re-download it so that the eye is touching. But just to save time, I'll just use what I have now. But that's something you want to keep in mind. Everything needs to be touching. Because once it's 3D printed, obviously the dot on the eye on this one at this point is going to fall off. But we'll just leave it like that for the sake of the class. If you can make a free Canva account, but one thing that you can't do if you don't have the paid account is download to that special SVG file that you need. You can see this little crown icon next to SVG. That means you need the paid account to do that. I have the paid account, so I was able to do it. But if you don't, what you can just do instead, it just takes like 2 extra steps, is just go to PNG, click on transparent background, download this file, and then you can just go to Google and look up something like this. I think, yeah, Adobe has a nice one. And then you can just upload it and change it from the one type of image file to the one that we need, the .svg. And then when you upload it, you'll have it come out like this. So Canva is a really good tie-in tool with this. You can do any type of text. You can find any type of image. You probably have to do a lot of looking up like silhouettes and stuff, because obviously if we wanted to, upload this to Tinkercad, this is just going to be a flat face. In Tinkercad, everything is one solid object. So like the painted on like eyes and Santa hat, that won't come out. It'll just come out as one solid shape. You kind of need to think like silhouette wise when you find stuff to upload into this. We'll go ahead and just finish this just again to practice some of the tools. Let's go ahead and select both of them. I'm going to use my align tool and I'll zoom out so we can see it. And again, I'm just going to click both middle buttons. You can see my text is still way too big. I'm going to select just my text, Shift and Alt key, scale it way down. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can see it. Looks pretty good. I want the text to be touching the ring so that when I glue it into one shape, everything is connected and it'll be one solid object. And this looks pretty good. I have this touching, and a couple bits on this side. We have that. If I want space to do additional stuff, I can just move it up a little bit so I have space at the bottom, and then maybe I get this additional touch up at the top left. So it's all, well connected and nothing will snap off. I'll do it, like that. That's pretty good enough. And then as we zoom around, we can see now that we scaled it down is way too, flat. It's not even with the ring itself. We can just change that. I'm going to click on my ring object. I can change this to, I'll say 5. And again, it's kind of a unitless 5. It's not like specifically inches or anything because we can change that at any time. I just want them to both be 5 so they match up and everything is flush on top like this. Then I can go ahead and now that it's pretty much matched up, select them both and use my group button to make one solid object. It's going to take a second to do a bit of calculations. And yeah, now I have one solid object. This is slightly too thick. We don't need to be, this thick. I can come back in and scale the whole thing down to be like a nice flat 2 like this at this point. And then I could do, the one last thing I might need to do is just add a little loop up at the top so we can, tie it and hang it on a tree or like a railing, something like that. I'm going to come in, we'll make a quick little loop. I can come in, same thing we did in the beginning. I'm going to make a quick little loop, copy this, hollow it out with the hole button, scale it down a little bit, it sits inside. It's now not tall enough to come all the way up to the top, so I'm just going to boost up how tall that object is. And then I can come in, use my align tool to match them up exactly. And now you can see we have a nice second ring. We could have just copied the one we made in the beginning and scaled it down, but it's just as easy to just make a second one real quick. Just group that object. I guess we have the second one. We'll use the height button to pull it down to, I think it was 2. Yep, 2. And then we'll go ahead and we'll just always use these automatic alignment tools so we don't have to match anything up. Align, put it in the middle like that, and then I'll put it up at the top. Lots of clicking. And then I'm just going to, when I click on something, I can move it with my mouse. But if I just use my up, down, left, and right keys, I can move it up exactly along that axis without moving it, left and right in this case. I'm keeping it locked exactly in the middle, up and down, but I'm just moving it up. And then obviously we should have done this at the beginning. We'll scale this down a little bit. We don't need this hoop to be too big. We have to do everything else again now, but that's okay. Come in, change this back to be too tall so it matches that. Now that seems pretty good, so let's just realign it real quick. Align, put it back. Button's missing. Now it's in the middle. Yep, so again, we can just click it. Use my up key, it's gonna swing it all the way up. And then we just kind of want to embed it in the side, so we won't have it, like this, because then it'll just be touching, it might snap off. Instead, we'll come in and embed it a little bit so it's sticking out and it's well connected to it like that. And then we can come in and group them. And then we have a nice little hoop on the top that we can tie a string to. Still might be a little bit thin actually, so we might come in and change the thickness of the ring. We don't want that to snap off, but we'll leave that as it is now. We have that. Still might want to do one thing with this design. You might want to go back into Canva and find something. I might want to make some custom text in Canva. This way, this is an element or just an image file in Canva. From this way, I just put some custom text on the page, chose the font that I wanted. And then one cool thing that Canva can do, which is useful in this case, is you can click on a piece of text, go to my effects, and then I can kind of round off the text like this, because I'm going to want this to be sitting inside this hoop in a second. So I kind of want it slightly bent up like that so it follows the bend of the bauble. I can do this like this. I also came in and changed the spacing so everything was kind of touching. Everything would be like well connected and stable once I 3D printed it. And then I can do the same thing, download as an SVG. If you don't have that option because you have the free account, you can download it as a PNG and then just go to Adobe to switch it from a PNG to an SVG. And then anything you make in a 2D thing like Canva, you can add to a 3D thing like this. When you add a 2D thing to Canva, it basically just looks like a 2D thing. It just adds a little bit of height to it, basically. So it adds some Z dimension to it. So I have a little bit of height to it now. I can change the height as I want, scale that up to 2. And we'll go ahead as just the last step, stick this piece of text inside this. I'm going over to align, put it exactly in the middle. I can click on it and just my up key to zoom in like that. I might need to scale it up a little bit. It's a little bit small. Scale it up like that, push it up a little bit. You can see it's pretty well seated. It's going to be stable when we print it out, but we still have a little bit of space that we could go. So maybe I'll boost it up like that. And then that looks pretty good. It's touching on the top too, so it's nice and connected. And then last step, I'm just going to come in, change my Z height down to 2 so everything is flush. And then I can come in and connect everything to do one last object like this. Let that load. And then, yeah, we have a nice little thing. We can print this out now. It shows in blue. I didn't mention this. It shows in blue. When you have any shape on the field and you click on it, you can kind of change, what it looks like in the 3D design. But obviously, when you actually print it out, then is when you choose which, plastic filament it's going to be. But you can just kind of select different things just to help you like see stuff on the page if you want. But this is basically just like style points at this point. We can choose it as yellow, but when you send it to us, you can have us printed out in like metallic bronze if you want. Okay, that's my little holiday thing. We'll move that off to the side. We have a couple of different things we'll take a look at. Let me see. Yeah, no questions. If anyone has any questions about the tools, anything they've been tinkering on while I've been talking, let me know. If not, I'm just going to show us a couple additional things that we could do. Come in. I'm going to make us a little, what we'll do now is I'm going to make us a little gift box. And then I'm going to have the lid kind of popping open and we'll have like a little animal head popping out of it, like it's, a puppy you got on, Christmas or a holiday. So we'll make this completely from scratch. This is something you could find uh, in this 3D website if you wanted to, but we'll make it homemade so we get to practice. I'm going to pull in a cube object that's going to be the base of my, keep it like that. And then I'm going to do, I'm going to begin with like the bow tie. I'm going to add the like the bow tie on the sides to begin, and then we'll do the actual knot on top. I'm going to come in. This is my present itself. This is going to be my tiny thin like strap of the wrapping ribbon on the side of it. I'm going to have it like that, and then have one on each side so it looks like a little present with a ribbon on top. I have one. I could glue it down now, but I'm just going to do all the sides at the same time. So I'm going to copy and paste it, and then I'm going to move it all the way to this side. Oops. Oops. Move it. You can see I've messed up a little bit, but we can just use my align tools to get these back on track now that I've accidentally got them out of sync. I'm going to line them up the same way this way. I'm going to scooch them both in a little bit until they touch the box. And then you can see one is sticking out not much at all on this side, and this one is sticking out a little bit. So what we can do is just select those two, group them like this. So now I have one object like this. And then I can use my align tool to put that exactly in the middle. And then you can see they both stick out on the side the exact same amount. Then all I need to do, copy and paste. I can align everything back in the middle. And then I'm just going to take one of these sets of, side bits and spin it. And then I have, oops, almost did it. And now I have all the sides like that with that kind of like the wrapping ribbon coming up the side. If I want to, just to help me like visualize it as I'm doing it, I can change these to be something else. So it kind of stands out. But again, once we print this out, it's going to be all in one, shade, one single filament. But what people do a lot is they just paint them once they get printed out. So you print it out in solid red, but then you can paint the ribbon to be something else if you wanted it to be like that. I got like that. If I come into my shape gallery, ribbon is not going to be, they have something, but it's not exactly what I want. All I did is I went to the Thingiverse website. I looked up ribbon, and then I just found one that I wanted, and then we'll just pretend this is it. I just came down to the files, downloaded the ribbon file by itself, and I'm just going to kind of steal that basically. This is what I've done up this way. I have a little 3D ribbon that someone else made. It's pretty, complicated. I don't know if I could make that. So I have my little ribbon, and I'm just going to use that from someone else's design. Everything in this website is free to download and use. It's just if you want to download it and use it to like sell it or something like that, then you have obviously a conflict. But if you just want to download this and use anything on this website and a home project, that's totally fine. Everything you find on that website is going to be fully available. Oops. One thing we should do is I'm going to group this whole object as one now that we finished with it. And then we can use my plane tool again if I want. And come back, find my plane tool, pop it on the top of the box, get my ribbon, tap D to drop it up in this case. Now it's flush with the top of the box. And then I can come in, put it in the middle, like that. It's pretty small. So what we'll do, cancel that, come back to my ribbon, gonna do Alt and Shift and then scale it way up until it meets the ends like that. And then, yeah, you can see it actually matched up pretty well. Let's be exact, actually. I'm pretty happy with that. We can come in and now we can glue this into one object if we want. And then one last thing. Oh, I see a chat real quick. Let me check on that. Okay, that's fine. Okay. And then one last thing. I also downloaded a cat head from the Thingiverse website. I didn't want to design my whole cat head from scratch. Just found something that had a cat head by itself. And now let's just see if we can just casually open the box and have the cat popping out. And then we'll kind of glue the lid on top of the cat's head like it's poking out a little bit. We've made this whole box. We made a closed box, but we can easily open this box in a second. And what we'll do is we'll duplicate this box. And now we have two of them. And what we'll do is we'll use this, any shape that we want, but we just need a whole shape. Let me get this into focus. Gonna pull it down a little bit. So I'm just getting like the lid like that. Let me actually scale it up a little bit. Put it like that so we can see it. And then I'll pull this down and then you can see it's kind of revealing how much of the lid that I'm now making will be left behind. So I'm gonna do just a little bit like that so it's not too thick. Then I can group this whole thing. Now I just have a lid that can be sitting on top of the cat. And then we'll do the same thing with this. I'm going to put my plane tool on the top edge of the box. I'll put this cube flush with it. Going to come in, align them so it's in the middle. Let's expand the box because it's missing the edges actually. Like that. Yep, and then we just want the base of the box itself. So I'll just come in, click on my hollow tool, and I can just move it down actually like that. And then I'll go ahead and group that. Yeah, now we took the one box and we duplicated it, kept one side as the base of the box and kept the second side as the lid. And now we can take this cat head that I found online and need to design it myself. And we'll go ahead and just kind of plop this in the middle and see what we can do in a minute. I'm going to put my plane tool on top of my box again. On my cat, use D to pull it all the way up. Can move it. Oops, not like that. Can grab my cat. Oops. Plane. I'm going to grab my cat head and pull it down a little bit. Let's expand it a little bit. So Shift and Alt, make it nice big cat head, but still inside the box. Like that, maybe. It kind of looks like that. It's got this little bottom thing. Again, I just stole this from a design, so I don't know what this little tag at the bottom is. But I can just click on my cat like this, and I'm just going to scoot him down a little bit like that. And that's not too bad, given that we just designed it in 2 minutes. I might want to flip the cat facing this way a little bit like that. And then I can just take my box And this time we'll have to do it a little bit manual because if I take my plane tool and try to plane the top of the cat's head, it's totally round, so I can't quite do it using the automatic tool. But we can, we'll go ahead and group this as one to begin with. I'm going to put that in the middle, and I actually lost it. Align that, and like that. Yeah, so we'll make this one, Control G. Yeah, Alice, did I get this? Like, how do I make a lid like how I just did, or do you have a question beyond how I just did it? So I just duplicated the box and then cut off half of it to be the lid, and then cut off the second half to be the base. Let me know if that made sense, or I should explain it again. Now I got this and that. Let me align them so it's kind of on top. Like that. My lid is kind of too low, so I'm just going to click on my lid, pull it up a little bit, so it kind of looks like that. We can maybe find like a different cat head that kind of makes sense, but it doesn't look too bad. I'm going to come in. Let's go ahead. And I'm going to like tilt it back a little bit, like that maybe. And then I'll pan it this way and move it back a little bit, like that. And then that's not too bad. That's pretty funny. And then it's going to check that it's touching on enough spots like this in this, so it's well connected, the lid and the top of the cat head. If it's not exactly as I want, I'll just scoot it down a little bit like that, so it's fully kind of seated inside. And then I'll come in and group the whole thing. And then I have my one cat present. And then, yeah, again, it'll come out in one solid plastic, but then you can paint the cat head. You can paint the ribbon to be something else. You can do all kinds of stuff once you get it. Put that down. Let's move that out of the way. And then I had one last thing, kind of the most complicated design that we'll make today to kind of show one last cool tool to make really cool stuff. This one that I keep going back to, I had this link open, so I'm going to make this in a couple, in a couple minutes, the last 5 minutes of class. We'll make this guy. Looks pretty complicated. We won't make something that's exactly like this, but I'll show you how you can make it pretty easily using basically just the buttons we've been using plus one new one, which will just kind of make it really easy. So we want to make this. I'm just going to kind of find like, aside the fact that it's hollowed out and it has all this design, I'm just going to try and find like a pine cone shape object that I can use. We go back to home, focus in on my shapes menu. I probably won't find anything that matches it exactly. What I can use is this paraboloid. Let me use that. And let's begin to think how we want to make this. I keep losing my place. We want the inside of it to be hollow, in addition to like the cutout design, wrapping around like that. So I'm just going to make a pine cone that's hollow to begin with, and then we'll handle kind of the flowing design cut out around the side of it. I'm going to come in. Let me flip this like this. Let's go ahead and hollow it out. We know how to do that now. Hollowing out stuff is pretty easy. Let's just make a duplicate, make it the whole type so we can cut stuff out. I'll shrink it down a little bit. Let me plane to the top of my solid object on this and do that. I'm going to align them like this. This is just all the stuff that we've done. Unplane. And then I'll just go ahead and move this down. I just use the D key. And then just moves it up a little bit like that. Let's see what that looks like. We don't have it to be too exact right now. Yeah, you can see I hollowed it out. It might be a little bit too thick on the bottom, so let's undo that. I'll click on that. We can see the bottom of the hollowing out comes down to this. Then we move this up a little bit. And then we can see, yeah, this line is the end of like the hollowing out. I can keep moving it down a little bit. We don't want the edges to be too thick, but we also don't want them to be too thin. That should be pretty good. That's not too bad. That's pretty good. We'll go ahead and we want to make like a pine cone shape. So what we can do, we don't have to do that all again. Let's just duplicate it like this. The new plane on the top edge of this because we want to seal them too, like closing a little like plastic egg. Click on this. Let me spin this 180. Use my D key to drop it up to my new plane, this orange box. And then I'll come in, align them like this. They match up pretty well. And then we can leave it like that. You can kind of change the shape as you want. I'll just elongate one side a little bit. I'll skew this up. I'll skew this up like this. So it's kind of got like a bit of unevenness, two sides like that. And then I can group them like that. I got my basic shape. I'll just show us the inside. I'm just going to take the shape. This is just to see what it looks like. I'm just going to cut out half of it so we can see that it's hollow in the middle, even though it looks solid on the outside. That's the inside of my shape. Pretty good on like the wall thickness. That's pretty good. We can delete this now. And then the last tool we'll use, let me just see question. Yep, so you can with different machines, you can design objects with machines that have the ability to hold like three plastic filaments at once. And then the machine basically 3D prints it, choosing when to switch between, red, white, and blue, stuff like that. With the machine we have, it's just you can only feed in one type of plastic filament at a time. But even if you design something that looks has a couple of different things, like the tree that we made, it's got the brown, the green, and the blue. When you send this to us and say print it out in blue, it's all going to come out in blue. So it is possible to multi 3D print, but just not with us because we don't have that type of machine. Okay. And then we want to make this. I'm not going to make this exact design, but let me show you what I want to make. We need some way of cutting out like along the sides in spirals. So I was going to make kind of like a homemade stencil. I don't know what you want to call it to accomplish that. I'm just going to make a shape. I'm going to kind of make like a long tool. Oops. Squidge it down a little bit. Let me lengthen it like this. I'm going to come along. I want it to be long enough to come out both sides at once, like this. Come in. I'm going to make it fancy. So instead of just a plain old box, I'm going to make a diamond shape. So instead of just having a box like this, I'm just going to spin it a little bit like that. So I'm going to cut out like a diamond shape along the side. This is basically what I'm going to be doing, cutting out a shape like this. We'll come in, we'll do one cutout, and then I'll show you the tool to do a whole bunch at once. I've moved my shape up. You can see I can do something cool just by bonding them like this. I can get a cool little cutout. And if I was doing this manually, I would have to do this, 50 times on this one object to do a whole bunch of cutouts and make it look cool. What I'm going to do instead, let me check this question again. Yep. Is I'm going to move this down. Oops. I'm going to move this down a little bit so it's at the bottom. Grab this, move this way down. You can see it's still coming out kind of both sides. I'll move it up a little bit like that. And then we have this cool tool that we haven't talked about yet called duplicate and repeat. And what I'm going to do, what it basically does is lets me repeat the same instruction a whole bunch of times. And it'll make sense in 1 second once I actually do it. I have basically step one of a process that I want to do, cut out a shape like this. And what I'm going to do is click on this cutout stencil that I'm using. I'm going to click on my duplicate and repeat tool. And what it's done is I have a second copy of that duplicate and repeat tool fitting in the same spot. So if I move it up, you can see I have two now actually. Now I'm going to do a couple things to this. I'm going to move it up a little bit. I'm going to rotate it a little bit. What happened to my rotation wheel? This one. I'm going to move it kind of like that. So you can see I moved it up and I rotated it. And now that I've done a couple things to the one object that I'm duplicating and repeating, I can just keep clicking this button and it's going to keep doing the same thing to this object. The original object, I moved it up and spun it. And then when I click the button again, it's going to take this second one and move it up and spin it. And then it's going to keep doing that again. This existing one, this topmost one, when I keep clicking duplicate and repeat, it just keeps moving it up and spinning it the next copy. I can do that a whole bunch of times. It just keeps repeating it exactly. So this is a good way to do a design like this when it would take so long to do it by hand. That looks pretty good. And then we'll stop now just to see what it looks like. I have a whole bunch of stuff on my page. I will make it one solid object. And now you can see I have a cool looking thing. It's just following one strip, kind of up the side. But what I can do now is I'll undo that copy paste. I'm going to find and select all of these objects that I can. Let me, all of these. And then I'm going to hold down, I select everything, and that includes like the thing itself, the pine cone. But if I hold down shift and click the pine cone, it's going to deselect that. Now I just have these guys. And what I'm going to do is duplicate and repeat all of them at once. And now that I've done that, I can come in and spin it. And I can see I have a second copy of all, 20 little stencils that I just made. I can spin the whole thing a little bit like that. Now I have like a second design going like that. Let me spin back so I can find my rotation wheel. Maybe that's a bit too much, maybe like that. That looks pretty good. And now I hit duplicate and repeat, so I can just do that again. And we can just kind of follow, and maybe one last time, a little bit off. It's almost touching the next one. That's pretty good. So I'll come in, shape them all like this. Once you have so many things in an object at once, sometimes the website slows down a little bit, but don't, panic if that happens. You might just need to wait while it does all this calculation. See, we would need to tweak this a little bit. We would have to change, exactly how much we rotate it by because the design isn't matching up quite exactly. And we should have stopped ahead of getting to the top because now this is floating off by itself and won't be attached. But just for the sake of time, we'll leave it like that. You would just need to do a little bit of tweaking to fully use the duplicate and repeat tool to do something, really cool. And then you might just add a little loop to the top to hang it up on. And then you can totally make stuff like this in, just a couple minutes. It's not actually as difficult as it looks like using that one cool tool. Okay, yeah, I went ahead and showed us a couple things today since we didn't have questions in the middle to fill the time. But I'll stop now if anyone has any last questions about the 3D design program. I think I hit almost all the useful buttons. We saw how to add stuff, how to delete stuff. We know how to download this now. And we also know how we can upload 2D SVG files. We know how to upload 3D files that we find in Tinkercad. We can find an existing file that someone has, like this stuff. We can download it and then open that file in Tinkercad and update it, modify it, anything that you want. We can do that. We know all that, and then we know how to come back to the library website and submit us something if you want to print it out. I'm just going to pause.